Dinosaur, written by Stephen Llewelyn and performed by Chris Barrie. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and click the notification bell to keep up to date with the latest installments.
Douglas took the last few steps more slowly. "Are you boys all right?" he asked the battered men. Both soldiers nodded, so he added the supplementary, "What the hell are these?" "Some sort of bird, sir," said Thomas. "With damn big teeth, isn't it?" added Jones. The winged nightmares, Douglas could see there were 7 of them now, were around a metre across the span with large heads, long snouts, and mouths fully loaded with savage reptilian teeth. Vicious talons adorned their feet and even their wings. Douglas studied them more closely. Their wiry, muscular little arms ended in clawed fingers, the largest of which extended all the way to the wingtip, creating the framework for the membranous wing itself. They were leathery, but also had short, downy feathers over their bodies, all russets and reds. He guessed these helped the creatures stay warm and display, as with birds. Clearly all the same species, each had a relatively short tail between their hind legs, which in turn were webbed together at the thighs. What did Tim call them? Pterosaurs. A vague memory surfaced of the young man explaining how the early pterosaurs had long tails, which may have been of some assistance to their aerobatics. However, the later, more aerodynamically advanced animals evolved much shorter tails. He guessed these creatures fell somewhere between the two. Their visage was terrifying, almost demonic, but there was also an undeniable savage beauty about them. "You managed to drop them with the Heath Riflesons, then?" asked Douglas. "Eventually, sir," said Thomas, more than a little unsettled. "Corp?" Douglas queried. "Well, sir, they dropped in the end, but I swear we stunned them hard enough to bring Jones here down. They can't weigh more than a kilo or 2. He stared down at the little creatures with horrified respect. "What's more, we found a scrap of meat on the deck that wasn't from them, or us," he added acerbically. "I think it might have been steak, sir. They were fighting over it when we arrived." "They were baited in here?" asked Douglas, raising his eyebrows in astonishment. "Looks like, sir," replied Thomas, frowning. "With steak?" "Oh, no," Thomas acknowledged. "Talk about a waste. I never even ate real meat before I joined the NASA mission, let alone steak. Well, you remember what standard fare was like back home, sir." Douglas grunted. He remembered. "Are they dead?" he asked. "I damn well hope so," snapped Jones, more rattled than Douglas ever remembered seeing him. "We had to give them a good blast, Captain," continued Thomas. "They just kept shaking it off, and they were so fast. They were tearing into us. I know we're to try non-lethal approaches where possible, sir, but—" "Don't worry, men," said Douglas placatingly. "Rather them than you, eh?" Thomas nodded and swallowed. Trained soldier though he was, this was well outside his theatre of experience. "We'd better get Dr. Pearson to examine the bodies and check they're not carrying any parasites or diseases we need to be aware of. You two need to get those wounds cleaned and seen to ASAP. "Not yet, sir," said Jones. "At least one of them got past us and flew down the corridor. A right nasty big one as well it was. There may have been more." "I didn't see anything when I ran up here," stated Douglas with alarm. "It must have gone the other way." He pulled his comm from a pocket and hailed the bridge. "Sandeep, close all of the internal bulkhead hatches immediately. They don't need to be locked, just closed. We seem to have a vicious flying reptile free on the ship. Put out a ship-wide warning over the PA, including the pod too, if their comms are up yet, just in case." He studied the control panel on the exterior hatch. "Better get Hero up here to repair this docking hatch too. The controls have been ripped out. It's like spaghetti in there." He turned back to the soldiers. "Sorry, boys. I'd like to send you to sickbay, but we need to guard that hatch against any more gate crashers. I'll get a medic up here to dress you up at least. Once Hero's done his thing and closed the hatch, you can take yourselves off for treatment and a full checkup. Like I said, we don't know what these critters might be carrying." "Yes, sir," the men answered without hesitation. "The lunatic who caused this might still be up here too." The soldiers looked at one another grimly. "So keep 'em peeled and watch your backs. Good work." Douglas tossed them a salute and left. Pulling the stun pistol he always wore these days from its belt holster, he turned the corner with caution. As it happened, the lunatic was actually down in engineering, pointing a loaded sidearm at Chief Nasaki's face. Hiro's comm binged, making him jump so badly that he almost fell back down the hatch. The black-clad figure gripped him with their empty hand, pulling him back from the edge. "Thanks," said Hiro automatically, before looking back down at the pistol pointing at his stomach. "Oh," he added glumly. The figure motioned towards the door with their gun. Hiro remained still for a moment. "I don't suppose that's unloaded by any chance?" he asked, attempting a friendly smile. It took but a fraction of a second for the gun to be pointed at the floor, fired, and returned to its position, covering the engineer. Hiro swallowed. The hole in the deck was about 15 millimeters away from his foot. He nodded sideways towards the door. The figure in black nodded up and down once. Hiro walked. "Your only chance of living out the week is to come completely clean now!" shouted Baines, all humour gone. Lloyd glared at his antagonist, breathing deeply. He was clearly steadying himself for something. "I have a request," he said at last. Baines leaned back in her chair, looking at him askance. "Go on," she prompted guardedly. "A single malt, a good one. And I'll tell you all I know. Everything." "You're bargaining for a whiskey? Now?" she asked in frank disbelief. "What other chance will I ever get?" he replied simply. "And make it a very large one. I'm sure that damn Scotsman will have some hidden away somewhere." "Better spell it W-H-I-S-K-Y then," she said, pulling out her comm. "Captain, it's like this." Within a few minutes the door to the brig slid open once more to admit Captain Douglas bearing a mature single malt, a Glencairn whisky glass, and a grudge. "Don't worry, Captain, I've got a glass," said Lloyd, waving a safety glass receptacle around smugly. Douglas looked down at the bottle and then at Lloyd, then down at the bottle again, then at Lloyd again. "Captain," said Baines, "I know it hurts, but—" "Stop talking," he ordered tetchily. "We can't torture the prisoner, but it's okay to torture me, is that it?" Baines covered her lower face with a hand, hiding a smile which threatened to escalate into laughter. "Maybe we can set up a still when we've gotten settled," she tried helpfully, but trailed off under the furnace of Douglas's glare. "A still?" He stared at her as if she were mad. "This is 50-year-old oak matured. 50 years old! I'm talking the Holy Grail, and you're talking rot gutshine." Lloyd waved his glass from side to side indolently. "Do I need to rattle on the bars or something? I'm unsure of the protocol." He was enjoying his last dig. Douglas wished like the Flying Scotsman himself. "Of all the people I thought I'd share this dram with, I cannae believe that—" "Ah, you'd better have something good for me, Lloyd, or I swear I'll put you outside for the neat like the damn cat for this." Douglas pointedly poured himself a generous measure first. Slowly, and with all the grace of a man parting with his last pennies to the taxman, he poured a little whiskey into Lloyd's glass too. "Ahem," said Lloyd, not moving the glass a millimetre. Douglas grumbled incoherently. Grudgingly, oh so grudgingly, he poured a little more into the proffered tumbler. "Thank you, Captain," Lloyd acknowledged. Smiling victoriously, he saluted with the tumbler and took a large swig. Douglas sat down next to Baines, in a perfectly foul mood. "Don't suppose you've got another tot there, have you, Captain?" she asked hopefully. Douglas turned slowly to face his first officer. "This was your idea, wasn't it, Jill?" he asked gruffly. "Well, I wouldn't say that. I mean, not exactly." Douglas gave a tight, mirthless smile. "Precisely. So you'll be needing to keep a clear head to make sure that we dinna miss anything, will you know?" he said with satisfaction. The duty guard's face crawled all over his head in an attempt to stay straight. Baines noticed and lashed out. "Eyes front, Private." Hiro and the masked figure made their way along eerily quiet corridors. To Hiro's dismay, The security guard between the new world and the pod had already been dealt with. He sincerely hoped the condition was not permanent. Presently, they came to the main cargo bay and motor pool. He was pushed towards the small hatch alongside the much larger cargo doors, wondering what on earth his tormentor's plan might be. The figure retrieved a heavily laden bicycle from behind a parked lorry, still covering Nasaki with the pistol. A brutal push sent Hiro sprawling in front of the personnel hatch. He picked himself up, turning back to face his captor in confusion. It was his first chance to stand back and study them, and he now suspected his life might be in the hands of a woman. She motioned towards the hatch. "You want me to open it?" he asked, incredulous. "Have you seen what's out there?" The masked head moved ever so slightly to the side as the gun raised another inch or two, the subtle movement and blue eyes speaking eloquently of patience expired. "Okay," he continued nervously, "but we have no power to these doors. When the captain's party went out, they used a power pack to open it. I don't have one." The figure merely lifted their head slightly, a subtle movement as the eyes darted around the engineer and back. Hiro looked around, cursing inwardly, as his eye alighted upon just what he needed. Stowed against the bulkhead, behind a mini digger, was the battery set the captain's team had used to power up the hatch. Out of options, Hiro complied, bringing the control panel to life. "Are you sure you want me to do this?" he asked, a tremor in his voice. The masked figure gave an economical, quick-jerk gesture with the gun, which was unmistakable. Hiro hit the open button. Nothing happened. He looked around. Smiling nervously, he tried again. Nothing. He said. "It should have worked." The gun flicked back towards him, making him throw his hands in the air. Give me a minute," he cried, turning back to the locking mechanism. It looked like the pod's hatch had been locked down from central control. Powering it up must have allowed it to receive the command wirelessly. Hiro frowned, not sure whether that was even possible with the power down all across the pod, and then he had it. "The chief of operations must have locked all ground-level access points down when we landed," he said, "just in case someone opened it up by accident. I wasn't part of the first mission outside because it turned out to be a security operation, but I think I can override it." The bulkhead portholes provided a low light, just enough to see by. Hiro tinkered with the control panel in the gloom for a few moments. When all of the overhead lighting came on, illuminating the whole cargo bay, it took them both by surprise. The terrorists snapped their head this way and that, assessing the situation in a heartbeat, before turning back to Hiro and pointing the gun at his face. The terrified engineer threw his hands up once more. "It wasn't me. That wasn't me." The black-gloved hand pulled back the firing hammer, putting the weapon to Hiro's head. With their free hand, they pointed at the door. Hiro gulped. Yes, I'm on it." Using his Chief of Engineering security codes, he attempted to unlock the hatch, and to his exquisite relief, it opened. He unplugged the power pack, unthinkingly leaving the inner hatch open behind him as he plugged into the external hatch at the other end of the airlock. He repeated the unlocking routine, too terrified to even look round. The hatch in front of him opened too, exposing him for the very first time to Cretaceous Gondwana. He peeked outside gingerly. The massive earthworks the construction team had built already stood 5 meters tall. Directly in front of the main cargo bay doors, 100 meters out, there was a large opening between the two ramparts, and through it he could see the clearing in which the new world had landed. The way appeared unobstructed right up to the tree line. Hiro's mind raced, the shock and wonder of his location suddenly real. He was about to exchange his controlled, man-made environment for the beauty and savagery of a world unadulterated. He would have loved to explore these musings and feelings more fully, but was all too aware of the clear and present danger standing right behind him. Slowly, hesitantly, he began to turn when all the lights went out again, but this time only for him. Burton whooped. "Let there be light, dude," he exclaimed loudly. Gleeson grinned as he shook the New Zealander's hand in congratulation.
"It's a good start, mate."
One of the panels began to beep at them. Burton studied it, his elation fading fast. "What the hell?"
"What is it?"
asked Gleeson. "Some drongos opened the hatch down in the cargo bay," said Burton. The moments stretched as they stared at one another in confusion. "Why would—" Gleeson began. Then his eyes widened in sudden understanding. He turned quickly to one of the other engineers in the plant room and snapped,
"Get the captain on the line. We need security down in the main cargo bay, and I mean bloody yesterday, mate."
He grabbed his rifle and ran out with Burton hot on his tail, not altogether sure what was happening. The two men ran into the main cargo bay, panting heavily. It appeared deserted, so they jogged across to the open pedestrian hatch, slowing with caution as they drew close. Daylight streamed in, meaning both hatches were open.
"Crap,"
Gleeson muttered. The Australian flattened his back to the bulkhead and warily looked around the corner. The New Zealander leaned around his colleague, mimicking the action. The sight which greeted them promised to return as a vision each night when they closed their eyes. "Whoa!" they shouted together, followed by,
"Nasso!"
Lieutenant Hironosaki lay across the threshold of the outer hatch, his body in the airlock, his head and one of his arms outside. Also outside, bent over and sniffing the prone engineer like an unfamiliar morsel at a buffet, was a huge, female Maposaurus.
"Ah!"
Screamed the Oceanians in unison. Gleeson's body remembered he was a soldier, and he automatically began shooting, the stun bolts hitting the animal's face with a percussive thump. The Maposaurus stepped back and grunted, shaking her head in surprise. After a moment she sneezed hugely, and all three men were hit by the return fire. After clearing her sinuses, she too found her voice. "Roar!" The magnitude of the sound almost stunned them as it bounced and rebounded in the small metal antechamber.
"Ah!"
The men retaliated. Gleeson fired once, twice, thrice, causing the massive beast to stagger back a little further. Burton saw his chance to undertake the bravest act he could ever wish to forget. He dove into the melee, dragging Hero's feet back until he was fully inside the pod once more. Shaking off the stun blasts, the animal spotted the New Zealander on his feet near the doorway. His whole world in slow motion, Burton's mind treated him to a flashback.
"Bigger and often even more aggressive than the male, the female Maposaurus."
The voice of Tim Norris spoke with a surreal calmness.
"I can't remember what he said next,"
cried Burton.
"What? Shut the bloody door!"
screamed Gleeson. The female Maposaurus had no such lapse in memory. She knew her business well. She opened her mouth wide and lunged, all rotten stink and teeth like steak knives. She was about to take Burton when his shattered wits caught up with the situation and he dove for the clothes stud. The hatch sealed quickly, knocking the creature's head to the side and deflecting its attack with barely a millisecond to spare. The New Zealander had sat through departmental accounts meetings which shot by faster than that instant. As he waited for the door to close, his legs caught up with his wits and collapsed under him. He fell on top of Hero, and they lay slumped together against the hatch.
"Is he alive?"
asked Gleeson.
"Am I?"
asked Burton, tremulously, shock hitting him like a train.
"Come on, mate, on your feet."
Burton refused to move for a minute. He was shaken and damn well not going to be stirred. Dr. Flanagan dressed the injuries to Private Jones's face and arms. The antiseptic must have stung like hell, but Jones barely flinched. Corporal Thomas was covered in plasters with a press and bandage wrapped around his left forearm. Before Flanagan could finish with Jones, his comm binged. He raised his eyes to the ceiling. "What now?" he muttered under his breath as he answered the call.
"Doc, it's Captain Gleeson. I need you to get down to the main cargo bay in the pod, mate,"
said the Australian, sounding anxious.
"What's happened, Captain?"
"Nasso's down. Step it like you're running for the dunny, Lieutenant. Gleeson, out."
Flanagan raised his eyebrows. Nasso? He repeated, slightly baffled. I think he wants me to move with alacrity. Sorry, Jones. I'll get back to you as soon as I can.
Do you want one of us to come with you, Doctor? I mean, if there's trouble?
Thomas asked with concern. No, Flanagan replied quietly, in his easygoing manner. You boys just make sure nothing else comes through that hole. He gestured towards the open hatch, gaping 20 meters above the ground. Quickly packing his equipment into a ubiquitous leather doctor's bag, he set off at a trot, not realizing that he had just made a mistake. Regret would follow on swift wings. He ran through the ship and pod, wondering what had befallen Nasso. He assumed the Australian meant Nasaki. Progress was slow, as every hatch was closed against him. They weren't actually locked, so he never thought to close them behind him, Singh's ship-wide warning completely driven from his mind in his rush to help an injured colleague. He ran. His heart pumped blood faster and faster, powering his muscles on and on. 2 snouts sniffed, hidden in an alcove as he ran past. The doctor had dead blood on his sleeves from the soldier's wounds, and hot blood coursing just beneath his skin. The killers released their clawed grip on an access panel, and surfing the currents left in the air by the running man, they rode his slipstream. He was just 2 hatches from his destination when they fell upon him from behind like javelins. Flanagan cried out in shock as the pterosaurs dove, knocking the 47-year-old army doctor to the deck with the ferocity of their strike. The murderous reptiles answered with a screeching cry of their own, as they set about their prey with tooth and claw. Rolling onto his back, Flanagan held the bag in front of him like a shield. Darting, diving, and screaming they came on, relentless. He punched and kicked, swinging the bag wildly at every opportunity, but the little animal's reflexes were liquid lightning. Every time he managed to land a bag or fist, they were already somewhere else, easily shaking off his glancing blows. The creatures were only small, but Flanagan knew he was in trouble and would tire long before they did, especially if they kept bleeding him. With a huge effort, he sprang to his feet, yowling in agony as a set of tiny jaws bit deeply into the back of his neck with teeth like tacks. "You little—" He managed to grab the smaller of the two, throwing it hard against a bulkhead before it could bite his face. But the animal merely turned in the air, barely scraping the wall. This was his last chance, and he ran for his life through the hatch, ignoring the constant bites and scratches as best he could. The final hatch was just ahead when Flanagan spun like a shot putter. Launching his bag at the open control 10 feet away, he dove. Sprawled across the floor of the main cargo bay, he used the last wind in his lungs to scream, "Hey!" 2 of Major White's men helped Sam Burton to a seat. They left Hero where he lay, unconscious, unwilling to move him before the doctor's arrival for fear of causing further injury. Gleason and White stood aside, catching up quietly, when they all heard a sudden scuffle and a shout from the far end of the bay. Seeking out the source of the commotion, they saw Flanagan on the deck, under a savage aerial attack from a pair of bird-like reptiles. The doctor covered his head as best he could, while crawling to retrieve his stout leather bag and only protection. "With me!" bellowed White as he ran to help. Gleason followed immediately, the other 2 security operatives hot on his heels. It took just seconds for the 4 soldiers to converge on Flanagan's position, but even so, his injuries were mounting up. He screamed in agony, his strength almost gone. White aimed a stun bolt at the larger of the 2 reptiles, knocking the animal back and forcing it to fly a small circuit of the area to recover. Having shaken off the effects, it came back at him like a fury, screaming hate. The whirlwind of teeth and claws targeted his face and eyes. He suffered a deep bite to his cheek and a claw across his nose before he was able to bat the creature away. The animal easily outdistanced his ineffectual counterattack, but by circling to come again, it created an opportunity, allowing one of the skirmishers to take another shot. The low-power stun bolt found its mark. Deterred, the little pterosaur flew a much larger loop, creating yet more space between it and the men. The soldier dialed his Heath Rifleson to maximum, and when the next bolt struck, the pitiless, flying nightmare was reduced to scorched leather and blackened bone as it fell from the air. quite dead. Gleason ran in close to Flanagan as the remaining pterosaur kept up a continual, withering attack on the weakening, unarmed doctor. The Australian caught the creature unawares with an army boot, stunning it. For a moment it lay on the deck, flapping one wing ineffectually. But growing up in the bush among other vicious predators, Gleason knew better than to give quarter. He jumped on the creature, landing double-footed on its little body and head. There was a sickly crack pop, and the fight was over. He turned back to Flanagan, who was bleeding from a dozen nasty cuts and gashes all over his head and arms.
Thanks for coming so quickly, mate,"
was the best he could manage. "Oh, any time," replied Flanagan, raising himself up on one elbow unsteadily. He felt very light-headed. "You okay, Dave?" asked White. "I could use a beer," he said, groaning weakly and raising his hands for assistance. "Help me up, fellas."
"Shall I get that German doctor down here?"
asked Gleason, full of concern.
"You look like crap, mate."
"Good God, no, I'm not that desperate, but thanks for your diagnosis, Captain." The healing power of sarcasm boosted Flanagan's strength a little. "Come on, let's check on Hero." Gleason and White glanced at one another, shaking their heads in rueful respect for the old warhorse. Together they helped Flanagan hobble over to the engineer, who to everyone's relief was beginning to stir all on his own. "Help me down to him," said Flanagan. Kneeling with a little help, he took the engineer's pulse, flicked a torch into his eyes, and made all the usual checks doctors perform whilst deciding what to do with the patient, or in Hero's case, the impatient. He attempted to rise, but Flanagan held him still. The doctor commented with a satisfied nod. "A small concussion. Nothing too serious. How many fingers am I holding up?" "How many fingers am I holding up?" Hero snapped, making a rude hand gesture. "Let me go." He sat up crossly. "I need to check the hatch. If they've broken my ship again, I'll—" The three men standing around the engineer laughed as Gleason helped him to his feet. "Gentlemen, would you help Hero to sick bay?" began Flanagan. "No," Hero interrupted. "I've got too much to do—" "Save it, Lieutenant," Flanagan barked, drawing on his last reserves. "Sick bay, that's an order." But nothing. Not even Douglas can overrule me on medical matters. You know that." He nodded to Major White. "Get him to sick bay, please, Major. Call ahead and tell Smith that Hero will need treatment for a light concussion and that he will be staying with us overnight." He raised his voice over the chief's futile complaining.
"You need to get there yourself, mate,"
advised Gleason, looking down at the doctor now sitting on the deck with his back against a wall. "I just need a minute," he replied, breathing heavily and wincing as he put a hand to his bleeding ear. He laughed softly as Hero was led away, cursing in Japanese. "He's all right." Looking across to where Burton sat, he inquired, "Are you injured, Sam?"
"Just a bit shocked, I think. Feels like someone pulled the plug out of my bathtub,"
he replied tiredly. "That'll be the adrenaline fade," said Flanagan. "I'm feeling it myself. Looks like you've had quite an adventure of your own down here."
"It's a gripping tale, mate,"
Burton replied wearily. "Go on."
"I'd rather not talk about it."
Flanagan chuckled again and reached up for Gleason to help him to his feet. "I feel like I've advanced my legs a generous bonus, and now I can't get any damned work out of 'em."
"Sorry I called you down into this, Doc," said Gleason. "Come on, you need to get that head looked at."
"Never truer words spoken," Flanagan snapped, and he limped off grumbling.
"Hang on, mate. We'll help you."
Gleason pulled Burton to his feet, and together they trotted to catch up.
Dinosaur, written by Stephen Llewelyn and performed by Chris Barrie. New installments uploaded each week. Subscribe for more. Visit the link in the description for free New World companion stories, available for download as ebooks.